I think the role of the trial lawyer is to be translator. You find a bunch of stuff that people tell you is important, and then you distill it, figure out what works. How does it connect thematically? And most important, what are the 2 or 3 takeaway points that you want the jury to latch on to? Because it's all they're going to take. In my view, the juries they're looking at big, tall mountains. They're not looking at the hills. That's what they're going to remember. And so as a trial lawyer, you simplify, not oversimplify, but simplify so that it's easily understood and easily retained. Juries, I think, get it if it's given to them correctly. They'll get it right.
Howdy, and welcome to the show. Cooper's Code focuses on legal issues and notable practitioners, distilling wisdom so we all achieve the best results for our clients. I'm Miles Cooper, and I'm thrilled to share this conversation with Clement Glynn, known to colleagues as Clem. Clem founded Glynn Finley in 1991, following an 18-year career at what was then Pillsbury, Madison Sutro. He's tried more than 50 jury trials in state and federal courts in California, Florida, South Carolina, Colorado, and Hawaii. He has represented clients in everything from product liability, toxic torts, employment, commercial disputes, business torts, real estate, intellectual property, oil and gas, to eminent domain. He's been inducted into the American College of Trial Lawyers and the American Board of Trial Advocates. His clients appreciate his practicality and ability to resolve cases efficiently and to try them when that is not possible. So please sit back and enjoy this stimulating conversation with Clem. Welcome to the show, Clem.
Good to be here.
I'm going to start kind of where I typically do, with a little bit about your background, where you grew up, and how you found yourself on the path to the law.
Born in the city, a lot more of us than people think, and lived on Divisadero in those days, and then at some point ended up in the Richmond district, 10th and Lake, Star of the Sea. Got burned out of 10th and Lake and moved to 20, but literally by a fire. Then went to 21st and Lake and transferred to St. Monica's and was headed for either Washington or SI. And then my family moved to Marin County. And so I ended up at Sanderville High School, which turned out to be a wonderful part of my life, and where I met my wife and played sports and played school. And we had just wonderful teachers that were all new. A crop had come in. They were energetic, really talented, and got a good education and good socialization. And that was 61 to 65. So that is, Vietnam was happening, but it wasn't happening as it would start to really happen a few years later. We were aware of it, but being in the suburbs in particular, there was some insulation. And then by senior year, it was really starting to become a part of everyday consciousness, and the nightly news with the body bags and all that stuff. So the family was highly dysfunctional, and I was one of 6, the only one to graduate high school, and certainly the only one to go on to advanced education. But as a result, I had no role models, certainly no lawyer role models. And I was in my senior year. Times have changed, and one of my friends said to me, "Where are you going to college?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I hadn't thought about it." And she said, "Why don't you go to SF State? They've got a good journalism program," because I was big on journalism in those days. I said, "Okay." So I went to SF State. It was okay, but it was the society was very much in tumult. The student strike at State, which many people will remember. Obviously, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act had just come online, and so the activity in the civil rights arena was very, very intense. And State was the scene of lots of stuff, violence, and this and that. And literally was going to school or going to classes, walking through mounted tax squad officers who were there to maintain law and order. And it was, so I was on the paper, and it was a very interesting time to be in that role. But somehow I made my way through there. I did take a year off because I went into the Army Reserves, and 2 months after I got married in 1968, I was put on active duty. My wife wasn't thrilled.
Did you end up getting sent to Vietnam?
No, we in the reserves, you're subject to being activated and called, and I never was activated, thank God. But did miss a year of school, which being in basic training and all of that, it was actually a very good experience, very humbling experience. You find out how unimportant you are as an individual. And came back, was in my senior year once again, figuring I would be a journalist, whatever that was going to mean. And it occurred to me that wasn't a good career plan. So I decided, based really on a television program, that maybe being a lawyer would be interesting. And there are crossovers. You get to write in both professions. You get to ask questions in both professions. But in the law, I can make people talk to me. And I like that. Because when I thought of being a lawyer, it was all about litigation. I didn't know anything else. I went to my wife, my young wife, and I said, I was thinking about going to law school. What do you think? She says, do it. And that was the extent of our conversation. So I ended up applying to Bolt, Stanford, and Hastings. Stanford rejected me by return mail. Bolt waitlisted me and then quickly rejected me, and then Hastings accepted me. And I'm glad it worked out that way, because I thought the education at Hastings was much more practical, and we had some fabulous teachers. Over 65 club, they called it, people who had been giants in the law and who got retired mandatorily. They would come to Hastings, including Prosser and others that are kind of household names for lawyers. So I did that, and I did well somehow. And the first interview I had for a job was with a firm called Pillsbury, Madison Sutro. They liked me. I didn't think they did, but they liked me, and I got offered a job as a summer clerk. Meanwhile, the other two interviews I had signed up for before that offer came through, I went through with. One was PG&E, which rejected me. And they sent a guy who was barely older than I was, and he wanted to talk about how unusual my name was. That didn't go over well with me. And then the other was the absolute worst one. It was the U.S. State Department. And by the time of that interview, I had essentially accepted at Pillsbury, but I went through with the interview. I figured I owed it because the timing was tight. And I just went casual, and the guy from the State Department had the perfect collar and the collar pin. And he took one look at me and said, oh, crap. And we had a very nice, brief discussion. So I went to work at Pillsbury, was there for 18 years, had a very good time there, and got a lot of trial experience because of my own personality and just the luck of the draw. And then became a partner, of course. And then 18 years into that, the call of the wild.
I want to unpack the 18 years at Pillsbury a little bit,
sure,
because I know for a lot of people listening to this program, getting trials, how one got trials, how one got the confidence to be in trial, those are skills that some people are either learning or are lifelong learners learning. How did you find yourself in a position at Pillsbury where you were getting out to trial?
Again, by luck. I was assigned to, in those days was called the Pacific Telephone and Telegraph Company Group. And Pac Bell, that was before the breakup of the Bell system, so it was one of the operating companies under AT&T. And that was my client, my sole client. So every day, for however many hours I've worked, that was my client. And until the California Public Utilities Commission disallowed it in a rate case, all you put was PT&T General 8.0. That was my timesheet. On the plaintiff side, you don't have these issues so much unless you're in a fee case. But on the defense side, we're grinders. We have to put all of our time down, and nowadays in 1/10 of an hour increments, which is the least pleasant part of practicing law. So the telephone company being first of all, it's a target. Utilities are generally not liked for sometimes good reasons, sometimes for no reason. And they had cases from soup to nuts, from little tiny cases to very, very big cases. And so because of that, I got a whole variety of cases: personal injury, property damage, contract, whatever. that were small to moderate, and was given a lot of autonomy in running the cases. I had great people I worked with, really wonderful people. I think in the first year or two, I was convinced that I didn't belong there. There were some people there that were just giants in the law. And, a lot of Ivy League and blue blood and all this stuff. And I had kind of a, blue collar working family, San Francisco State, how did I get into Pillsbury with, my credentials? But then after about 2 years or so, I started thinking, you know what? I got tools that I can use that there's people here who don't know about. They don't know the street. They don't know things that they didn't have to struggle. And I've always believed that people have to struggle in life in some particular way. It doesn't matter. They build muscles that other people don't build. And, in our business, our profession, it's highly stressful. You need to be able to not go to pieces. And so if you've been through adversity, if you've been through things that test you, I think you have you can get broken by it, but assuming you survive it, you're able to navigate it better than people who've never really had a tough one to deal with, So I see that in people even to this day. You see some terribly smart, well-educated people who are kind of useless when it comes to hard stuff.
You mentioned having a dysfunctional family. You mentioned the fire. Was there anything that you feel in particular that you felt helped you with the positive struggles, I guess, would be a way of putting it?
I think all of the struggles are positive if you survive them. The dysfunction came from, my parents were divorced before I had memories of my father. My mother was borderline personality disorder, undiagnosed, but she was. And so I tell people I was raised by a terrorist. And every day was a new day to survive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I won't tell you the particulars, but there were lots of things. And, the good news is she didn't die that many years ago. She lived to 96, proving again, only the good die young. But she was, I forgave her and figured it out and all of that. So I wasn't scarred that way. But she had major impact on helping me develop survival skills. One of the things that comes from that is you can compartmentalize. And in our profession, being able to compartmentalize can be really good. It doesn't mean you always sleep at night well, but it does mean you can maintain unpleasant things in the background if you have to.
Were you the oldest, youngest?
I was one of six. I had 2 above, 3 below. I was the only boy.
Okay.
And so as a result, they could hit me and I couldn't hit them. And they were encouraged to. So part of it was luck of the assignment, and then part of it is personality, because in the big firm in particular, people are culturally worried about taking a loss, and because it may be held against them. I think in smaller firms where people all are trying cases, that doesn't happen the same way. Unless somebody took the loss because they really did something horrible. But one of the things I like about ABOTA, for example, or the American College, these are people who have something in common with you. You have that shared background of knowing what it's like, not just judging people who are involved in it, but you're involved in it too. And it's one of the reasons I end up liking lawyers is because of that common background and that shared life experience that we have. And that's true regardless of whether we're plaintiff side, defense side, or, if you go in the trenches, then you understand. And so I was willing to, and I wasn't afraid to lose. And I didn't lose a lot in the early days. Over time, you pick up a few where I've won cases I should never have won. And I've lost cases that I thought I had won. But my personality was such that I was willing to take risk. And by the time I was a 5th-year associate, I was involved in a very big case that had implications across the entire Bell system, Equal Pay Act and job evaluation issues and discrimination issues. And it was really a big deal. And the on that case, I was second chair, which was unusual for me, thank God. And the partner who led it suddenly, while the case was pending, decided to lateral to Morrison, Forrester. In those days known as Morrison, Forrester, Holloway, Clinton, and Clark. Those in the younger generations have never had the treat of that musical name.
I think MoFo is the way that firm is typically referred to.
Yeah, it's MoFo now, but it used to be Morrison, Forrester, Holloway, Clinton, and Clark. So he goes, and Pillsbury let me run it. And I took it to trial for Bill Schwarzer and got a good result. It used to keep me awake because I just knew if I took a loss for reasons that aren't worth going into, it was going to have implications all across the Bell system throughout the United States. And I just thought, so why they let me do it? They saw something, I guess, that I was willing to do it. They thought I could do it. And then I've tried, a lot of cases and tried a number there. And then 19 years into it, for all sorts of reasons that are probably boring, the call of the wild called. And I thought, I'm pretty good at this. Why don't I start my own firm, and then I don't have to be on any more committees? And so I did. And because for a while, I guess I skipped a step, from 86 to 91, Pillsbury had opened up an office in Walnut Creek, and I got to manage that. And we were about 10 or 11 or 12 lawyers, but we had the big firm name. We had artillery we could call in if we needed it. We didn't do that much. We had our own, we were able to put down fire. So it was a great thing. And then when we left, I left with a couple other lawyers. We started a firm in Walnut Creek. And we've always been about that size. We've stayed about that size. But, and I've done that since 1991. And obviously the clients I was exposed to while at Pillsbury and the things I learned there allowed me to do that, because otherwise I would have been leaping into an abyss with no rational hope of doing anything. But I had clients that liked me, came with me, and then, I've kept trying cases in the new firm. So it's been a good ride.
If you're enjoying what we're doing here with Cooper's Code, please help us extend our reach by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and consider sharing an episode with a friend. Additionally, we want to know who you want to hear on the show. Have an interview suggestion? Email us at podcast@coopers.law. As you got the new firm underway, are you a generalist? Are there particular types of cases that you tend to handle more of?
A generalist in litigation. When people ask, what do you do? I usually say what I don't do. Because, the PT&T days, that was it. It was the generalist. And some very arcane stuff under the Public Utilities Code, but other general stuff that transfers over.
I did want to ask you about telephone directories.
Yeah. Because
I understand one of your trials was a telephone directory case. And for those who don't know, there used to be a large, heavy thing called the telephone directory that had all sorts of information in it, and people would pay to advertise in it.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, one of the jobs you had, at least for one trial, involved that situation.
Yeah. Actually, that was a steady part of arcane part of our practice, but called directory error cases. And so every year the telephone company would publish the telephone book, and there were the white pages, which had residential one-line listings, and then there were the yellow pages where people could purchase ads, display ads of various sizes. And they're dealing with thousands and thousands of entries, and invariably there would be errors, either errors of complete omission or errors of a different type, maybe misplacement. And so the very first case I tried was a directory error case, and there was a tariff that protected the telephone company. So if they were guilty of ordinary negligence, they owed nothing. It could harm the business, because in those days, unlike the internet days, telephone directory was an advertising source for people. That's how you found, plumbers. And if you could prove gross negligence, then you could recover your damages up to, but not exceeding $10,000. And so I went out on a case where a psychiatrist, which is a medical doctor who was listed under psychologists, And he was furious. And he went down the next year and hand carried his ad through the process, insisted, you people messed me up and I'm not. So he did that, and they managed to completely omit him that year. So he shouldn't have gone down. And so we go out and try the case, and I win. The person on the other side, the lawyer on the other side, he was pretty young too. And I think I mentioned to you in an earlier conversation, I just felt exhilarated. I'm 1-0, and this is great. I knew I could do this stuff. And I next morning, I'm at the office, strutting around the hallways and making sure everybody saw me. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, probably not completely. And my secretary comes in and says, Judge so-and-so is on the line. And it was the trial judge. And my reaction was, oh, damn, I'm in the club. The judge is going to call me to tell me what a wonderful job I did. Oh, I just love this. And you get on the phone. Good morning, Your Honor. Mr. Glynn, Judge so-and-so. Yes, sir. Good to hear from you. I have 2 things to tell you. Yes, sir. I couldn't wait. First, it's possible to be overly prepared for a case. So he's telling me I overdid it a little. And second, never, ever, ever address a juror by his or her name. And because we didn't have litigation training in those days, I learned by doing. I had in a closing argument said, well, Mr. Cooper, how would you yourself feel if, and of course I know now and knew from that moment on, you don't do that. You don't get to talk to them as buddies or people that at the bar with you. That was the sort of illustrious start of it all, but that was one I'll never forget.
So was over-preparing was that just a one-off there, or was that kind of a theme for you in terms of your ability to prevail on cases?
Any trial lawyer knows that preparation is the secret, not moments of divine inspiration. Every now and then we get one where we say, I'm going to go there. But, we're taught if you're going to cross-examine somebody, know the answer, be able to prove what it is. Don't hope you can get an answer. And I think what the judge was commenting on is, just that I overkilled it. It wasn't that the amount of preparation I had done as much as the amount of his time I took on a simple case. And, I had no perspective. I had no idea. I just knew I wasn't going to leave any argument behind. I was going to go for it. And he put me in my place. And, we've all, if we try cases, we get bumps and bruises, and we say the next time, I don't want that one again. I remember what that felt like. And that's what we learned. I marvel at it, really, given all of the tools available to people today, whether it's be CLE or seminars or whatever. In those days, we really didn't have that. And Pillsbury later had litigation training programs, and I'd be on the panels and so forth. And we didn't have those. And I didn't even sit down with anybody before that first trial and say, okay, now what do I do here? I'd never seen a trial. I'd never been to one. So I didn't know how they worked. And so I learned, but some of it the hard way.
You mentioned that it was a television show that caused you to shift from wanting to be a journalist to wanting to be a lawyer. What was the show?
The show didn't make me change. It identified a profession.
I see.
The change was inspired by me thinking, okay, what does a cub reporter typically get to do? And the answer is you go to Modesto or Coalinga and you attend city council meetings until midnight and then report in 2 paragraphs on what happened. Or, better yet, you can do the obits for Elmer and Lenore and all the people that are now on the wrong side of the grass in your community. So that got me thinking. And there was a program, you can still see it on YouTube, anybody who happens to listen to this, called Run for Your Life. And Run for Your Life starred an actor named Ben Gazzara. And for movie buffs, he was the accused in Anatomy of a Murder with Jimmy Stewart. A young Ben Gazzara. And then he had a long and rich career. In this one, he plays a San Francisco lawyer, so that got my attention, who had been in the very beginning, as they're running the credits, you're hearing the voiceover of his doctor tell him that he's got 6 months to a year to live. And the doctor says, well, what are you going to do? And Ben Gazzara says, well, I've never taken a day off since law school. I guess I'm going to go, see the world. And in every episode, Gazzara's legal training somehow came into play to allow him to protect himself or protect others. I remember there's one episode where, there was a redneck sheriff who had, busted him for something, and and so he knew the ropes. And that really appealed to me. It was more than the economics, although I figured they'd be better than journalism. But that really appealed to me because I had a kind of a instinctive distrust of authority. I was never particularly rebellious or anything like that, but I did feel that there were people out there that would take unfair advantage of me if I couldn't defend myself. Whether it's in the government or somewhere else, I just figured better to know your way around. And so that was my role model. And it's pathetic, but it worked out. It worked out pretty well.
Certainly seems like you have learned your way around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm still running for my life.
Yeah. I took you down this path in part because I thought it'd be kind of fun to hear about that first trial, but also you were talking about being a generalist, and it was easier to list the things that you don't do. So nowadays, with the firm that you're, I would say, running.
Fortunately, I don't run it as much as I used to. It's good for the firm.
Well, and maybe that's a good direction to go. How do you spend your days at this point in your career?
There's not a lot of firm management in our firm. I'm blessed. I have partners that are all younger than I am, and we're very different people, but we value each other. And so decision making is pretty simple. I mean, really simple. We've never had a fight over money. We've never had any fight, and we've rarely had anything, despite our really significant differences politically and otherwise. We never had an argument. We had one occasion where we were trying to figure out what should our policy be for paid leave for jury service. What if somebody goes out on a 2-month murder trial? And the majority of us, not with a lot of thoughts, say, well, we're a small firm, let's, maybe cap it at 2 weeks. And then one of our partners said, we are in this system. How can we expect the system to be there for us if we don't support it? And if we have somebody who's gone for 2 months, we got to do that. And we instantly kind of looked at each other and said, he's right. That was the argument. It wasn't an argument. So management's very simple. My days are, I used to be in, even when I was in the city, I was usually in by 6.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
And that's still true now?
Yeah, I get in about 7. I'm 76. I got to take it. It really had changed because of the pandemic. The pandemic started, just my routine changed. And so I used to get up, get in the shower, wash my hair, brush it, take my vitamins, and off I'd go. And I'd literally get up and be out of the house in under 30 minutes and be at work 15 minutes later. And that's when I was in Walnut Creek. When I was in the city, there was BART in between me and the city. Then when the pandemic came, we were doing more stuff remote, although I was really back to the office within 2 weeks of the pandemic. I was an essential worker, and there was nobody else around me, so it was a safe place. There were 2 of us that used to go in. But I just got a different rhythm, and so I'll get up now and have coffee. I'll go online. I'll look at emails, whatever. I might be doing work-related stuff beforehand, but just change the rhythm. And so I go in at 7, and now I go. And it depends what's going on. If there's a deadline or something, it's a different day. But standard day, I might leave 3:30, 4. I don't stop for lunch. I just keep going. And then my cases they vary. I've done a bunch of employment trials. I've done personal injury. I've done contract. I've done eminent domain trials. I've done what I don't do any hardcore securities. I don't do any hardcore antitrust. I don't do patent or hardcore intellectual property. We've dealt with trade secrets, of course, and other issues. So And I like being a generalist because I think the role of the trial lawyer is to be translator. You find a bunch of stuff that people tell you is important, and then you distill it, figure out what works, how does it connect thematically, and most important, what are the 2 or 3 takeaway points that you want the jury to latch onto, because it's all they're going to take. You want to give them thematic files that they can put stuff in, but this is the over preparation thing. As trial lawyers, we want to know every single thing. We've got it all, and we worry about all the things in limine and all these other things, and then you get into the courtroom, and the juries, in my view, they're looking at big, tall mountains. They're not looking at the hills. That's what they're going to remember. And so as a trial lawyer, you simplify, not oversimplify, but simplify so that it's easily understood and easily retained. And then you keep hammering at it so that so that it stays retained, because you may be there and that's your everyday world, but it's not there. So, we give juries, I think, get it if it's given to them correctly. They'll get it right.
Thank you for listening, and please join us next week as we continue this conversation. Like what you heard? Share us with a colleague and leave us a 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. To all of you doing justice out there, happy hunting.